Ladies and gentlemen, hit subscribe to this channel right now. This is one of the most important live streams on this topic. I believe Samuel Alito and every other conservative justice, even liberal justices, have already decided they're going to overturn this unconstitutional guilty verdict with Trump, and here's the reason why. Hit subscribe. You can go yourself after this live stream to the FEC website. This is the federal government's website on statutes, laws, and regulations pertaining to the FEC. There is no statute, there's no federal statute that Trump broke. This is why it's unconstitutional. A state cannot decide without the Department of Justice and without the FEC that Trump broke federal campaign finance laws. They cannot elevate. It is unconstitutional to elevate misdemeanors that have already expired in terms of the statute of limitations, misdemeanors into federal criminal statutes without a federal criminal statute, or misdemeanors into felonies without an FEC statute. You can look, and really quickly, you can go to all the different federal campaign laws. We're going to get to Samuel Alito. We're going to get to future President Trump, former and future President Trump. You'll hear from legal scholars. Hit subscribe, but listen to this and just watch. These are all the statutes from the FEC. Okay, you can go to the website. It's a PDF. You can get all of the statutes. There are hundreds and hundreds of statutes here. They're all explained. U.S. code, and then just all, 30125, they're all there, 9002, okay. So, they're all there. They govern candidates' personal expenditures. They don't list hush money in the sense that Trump paid as a crime. According to federal FEC Chairman Hans A. von Spakovsky and FEC Chairman Bradley Smith, the FEC dropped the case. There is no statute within this campaign law PDF compiled by the Federal Election Commission in 2019 right here. There's no law that Trump broke. That's why it is going to be overturned by the Supreme Court. Before sentencing, hopefully before sentencing, you can go to the FEC site and you can try to find the statute, that the imaginary invisible statute that Democrats convicted Trump on. You will not find it because they have not told anyone the federal statute. Hit subscribe again to this channel. Very, very important. There is no federal statute that Trump broke. Now let's get to Justice Alito really quickly. It's a bunch of nonsense that they're obsessed now over Justice Alito flying different flags. His wife did, actually. There's no way that Justice Alito isn't going to be at the forefront of this, especially how they're treating him. They think that he is biased because his wife decided to fly a certain type of flag, and so you'll get the story right now. It's complete nonsense. Meanwhile, you have judges overseeing Trump's conviction and prosecutions that have literally donated to organizations like Stop Republicans, where they're embroiled in working against the Republican Party in for example, New York City, run by Democrats. We can go on forever with the conflicts of interest, but let's listen to Samuel Alito and the latest controversy that Democrats have conjured up.
Over the sham trial of President Trump, who did nothing wrong. Not only is his daughter raising money off of the Alito, Kaylee, this is just another partisan smear against Justice Alito because he's an outstanding justice who upholds the Constitution and the laws as it's written. He doesn't bow to left-wing pressure. He's under no obligation to recuse from cases because of a flag his wife flies. And for that matter, I want to say that Martha Ann Alito is a great patriot. I commend her for flying a patriotic flag that goes back to George Washington. For that matter, I think I'm going to start flying it outside of my office here in the Senate. And if you want to look at judges who have recusal problems, why don't we look at Judge Merchan in New York, who's presiding over the sham trial of President Trump, who did nothing wrong. Not only is his daughter raising money off of the trial over which he's presiding for Democratic hatchet men like Adam Schiff, he himself contributed money to Joe Biden, violating New York judicial ethics rules. He's the one that should be recusing from cases, but you don't hear the Democrats or the New York Times.
You have judges literally donating to Biden, and they're going after Alito for this nonsense. They just have to make things up. They want him to actually recuse himself, whereas judges overseeing Trump's conviction, prosecution, are embroiled in Democratic politics and the hypocrisy is unbelievable.
Demanding that Judge Merchan recuse from that case because they want to weaponize the justice system against the president. And if they can do it to President Trump, they can do it to any Republican or conservative across the country.
No, instead, the New York Times and Rolling Stone, they appear to be far more interested in Christians. New York Times, one of the qualms with this flag is it's someone who views that their faith is instrumental in their life. In Rolling Stone, you talk about flying a flag outside of your office. Check this out. The key to Mike Johnson's Christian extremism hangs outside his office because Mike Johnson flies the same flag, and a spokesperson for Mike Johnson says this was given to him by a pastor. So that's problematic now, too, being a Christian in government?
Well, for the left and for Joe Biden, yes, it is. I mean, his own Department of Justice has targeted, for instance, traditional Catholics who've been going to masses that they disapprove of. It's just another example of how Joe Biden and the Democrats have weaponized our government, used it against their political opponents like President Trump, and something that you expect to see in countries like Pakistan and Georgia, not the United States. And again, if it works with Donald Trump, they're going to do it to any American who believes in things like flying a flag that George Washington designed, or making an appeal to heaven for our country, which millions of Bible-believing Christians do every single day.
You know, I'm interested in the timing of these attacks on Justice Alito, because one references a flag flown more than...
So Democrats, when you have 50 intel officials, for example, 50 intel officials come out of nowhere, lie through their teeth about Hunter's laptop. Okay, now Hunter's laptop is literally part of his criminal trial. But we were told that it was a propaganda campaign by the Kremlin. Of course, everything that hurts Democrats is a plot by the Kremlin to inform us of how criminal and corrupt Democrats are. So, 50 intel officials, you don't think that's a conflict of interest when you have government officials trying to prevent the United States of America, trying to prevent the electorate from knowing the truth about the Democratic Party? And then you have, like I said, you have prosecutors, DAs, district attorneys, attorney generals who literally run on trying to convict Trump. If the tables were turned, they would say the same thing and more. When they look at Trump and they say he's going to go after Democrats, he's a tyrant, he's going after his direct political rivals in a phone call, we need to impeach him. They impeached Trump for a phone call. They think that was an impeachable offense. Meanwhile, in a blue state, in a blue city, with prosecutors and a legal system that is essentially part of the Democratic Party, they convict Trump, and they think this is the rule of law. The conflicts of interest are unbelievable. Let's continue.
4 years ago, one references a flag flown more than 1 year ago, and all of a sudden this comes out just now. Your colleague, Senator Ted Cruz, has an idea, a theory as to why. Listen to this.
This is all about trying to delegitimize the court. The Democrats, almost every Democrat in the Senate, if they win, they want to pack the Supreme Court. They want to grow the Supreme Court from 9 justices to 13 justices.
I thought the left respected our institutions. Is this really about attacking an institution, a third of our government?
Kayleigh, the left has been attacking the Supreme Court for years since it's had a center-right majority. I think specifically why now the Supreme Court is considering two cases, both of which affect Donald Trump and hundreds of January 6 defendants. The first case is a case in which the Supreme Court, I suspect, will find that presidents of any party have to have presidential immunity to some degree from criminal prosecution. That could shut down the cases against Donald Trump.
And if you watch this channel, ladies and gentlemen, I told you about the 9-0 unanimous Supreme Court decision that would overturn the unconstitutional Colorado ban. I told you he would get a huge victory on immunity, and I'm telling you, hopefully before July 11th. I don't know the time. I can't tell you the time frame, okay? I have to be honest. I can't tell you when. Hopefully before July 11th. I think it would be an absolute travesty if a man goes to jail and he's innocent. Trump is completely innocent of everything he's been accused of. The unconstitutional verdict is so absurd. And I explained right in the beginning of this live stream, there's literally no federal statute he broke, which is why it's unconstitutional, which is why Samuel Alito and Clarence Thomas and the entire Supreme Court, I think even liberal justices will overturn this. But I can't tell you the time. Like, I'm hoping it's before July 11th. It could very well be right before November 5th. I'm hoping it's before sentencing. It has to be before sentencing, but let's continue.
A second case is about the Department of Justice under Joe Biden stretching laws to the breaking point to prosecute hundreds of January 6 defendants for crimes that are not really what Congress intended. Both of those cases are going to come down in the next month. I suspect the New York Times and Democrats are once again targeting Justice Alito because they want to undermine the court's credibility.
What Democrats are doing is unconstitutional, blatantly unconstitutional. They know it is. That's why there was a unanimous Supreme Court decision overturning the Colorado ban. Even liberal justices overturned their absurd, unconstitutional Colorado ban. They know that they know the immunity case is going to favor Trump because they're trying to imprison Trump, even though he was president and he did have the authority and protections of being commander-in-chief when he made the speech, told people to go peacefully. So a lot of the things that they accused him of a rebellion, which is of course nonsense and completely false, these are fantasies that Democrats believe in. These are things that are categorically not true, which is why the Supreme Court is involved. They're not influenced by the Times, the Washington Post, MSNBC, CNN, Kimmel, Colbert. They're not influenced by the things that a lot of Americans are influenced by. The Supreme Court doesn't care, okay? And Democrats changed, I think it was, what's his name? From Nevada, Harry Reid. Democrats changed the voting to just a simple majority instead of a supermajority of 60 votes in the Senate for the Supreme Court. That made it easier to get Gorsuch, to get Kavanaugh, and to get Barrett for Trump. Trump did so many great things in addition to 3 conservative justices. Okay. I mean, the man did so many things in his presidency. Biden has done literally nothing except pass hilarious legislation like the Inflation Reduction Act, which only served to increase inflation and interest rates. But let's continue. Actually, let's continue. This is Harvard professor Alan Dershowitz talking about how it was completely unconstitutional. So you see they're after Samuel Alito like they've been after Justice Thomas. Here is exactly why. What they do is unconstitutional. They know the Supreme Court will overturn or issue a rebuke or block and prevent them from doing these things. Then they have their public relations machine ready to then disparage the Supreme Court because they know what's going to take place.
Trump reacting to the jury finding him guilty on 34 counts in his New York City trial. The Biden-Harris 2024 communications director, meanwhile, Michael Tyler, saying this: in New York, we saw that no one is above the law. There is only one way to keep Donald Trump out of
Certain Democrats are definitely above the law.
The Oval Office, and that is at the ballot box. Joining me now is Harvard Law Professor Emeritus. He is author of Get Trump, the threat to civil liberties, due process, and our constitutional rule of law. Spot on. Even before all of this happened, there's the book. Alan Dershowitz is here. Alan, thanks very much for joining me this morning. You've seen this trial unfold firsthand. You had a front row seat in that trial. Your reaction to the verdict?
My big disappointment is with the jury. You know, juries are supposed to be a check and balance on the excesses of prosecutors and judges. This jury failed its role of checking and balance these excesses. Of course they did, because they were handpicked by the judge and by the prosecutor to be anti-Trump. These were get Trump jurors.
By the way, nobody in that court, I don't think, I mean, let's put it this way. I'm not certain, but I would venture to say that nobody was given this FEC handbook on laws. These are all the statutes, ladies and gentlemen. These are all the statutes that Trump could have broken. He violated literally none of these statutes. Not one. Not one. Nobody in New York went on the FEC site. The FEC, the Federal Election Commission, dropped the hush money case. The Department of Justice didn't do anything pertaining to the hush money case. It wasn't even a case. It was complete nonsense that they just cobbled together misdemeanors with an imaginary federal statute. And then the rebuttal is, well, there's a New York statute that says that you can't conspire. The New York statute has nothing to do with Federal Election Commission laws. So you can't say that Trump committed a federal crime because he broke a New York statute on campaign finance laws. That's complete nonsense. Otherwise, you'd have politically motivated prosecution and convictions of Democrats in every red state. Oh, there's a statute in Florida or Texas or Alabama that says that the foundation of a former Democratic president did this and that on a federal level. Well, you can't do that. You need the federal government to be involved, the DOJ or the IRS or the FEC in this case. But anyway, let's continue.
These were jurors who voted between 85 and 90% not to allow Trump to be president, and they will do anything to prevent him from being president. And so their vote was the second vote on November against him being president. It wasn't a vote on the facts or the law of the case. The facts of the law of the case here are an absolute joke. There isn't a serious lawyer in the country, Democrat or Republican, who will privately tell you this was a legitimate case. I'm getting calls from friends of mine who are Democrats and who are liberals, but who won't speak out, who say, of course this is outrageous, of course this is a political trial, of course there was no basis for convicting him of a misdemeanor based on the statute of limitations, but we're thrilled, we're happy, we're cheering for the result, because this is part of the whole get Trump mentality. And, maybe it'll backfire, maybe it won't, maybe it will be reversed on appeal. My worry is that the appellate judges are just like the jurors. They're afraid of coming back home and being accused of being the ones who allowed.
Are they
We're here in court.
intimidating people right now, even before? I mean, how much of that intimidated the jury, do you think?
Well, I think the jury was very much intimidated, even though they were anonymous. I think the judge was intimidated. Nobody wants to be Dershowitz. You know what being Dershowitz means? It means being very popular in places like Martha's Vineyard and Harvard, then defending President Trump on constitutional grounds, and being completely canceled so that no one will talk to you, to your family members, your wife, and every juror understands.
And that happens to me and you probably. I've lost like 10 lifelong friends because of the sin of voting for Trump or supporting Trump or speaking my mind about politics. I don't care if someone votes Biden. If you want a terrible economy and an atrocious foreign policy, good for you. Go and vote Biden. I don't really care. Or Clinton, if you want more wars and all that. So go and do you. But with Democrats, it's like they purge themselves. It's really unbelievable. I mean, they're the ones who actually do live in this cult-like status where they have to purge themselves of people they know that, God forbid, voted Trump or support Trump because of a great economy and a great foreign policy. My God, why would you not want to support this man? But this is Will Scharf, one of his lawyers, talking about the Supreme Court, ladies and gentlemen.
With the judge being the way that he was, just making absurd judgments on evidentiary issues, on legal issues, the way that he was, just making absurd judgments on evidentiary issues, on legal issues. I really don't think there was anything else that could have been done. I think Todd Blanche and Emile Beauvais and our trial team did an outstanding job. I think they thoroughly discredited Michael Cohen on the stand. But I think you had a judge who essentially, with his jury instructions, guided the jury to a guilty verdict instead of guiding the jury to an even-handed deliberation of the.
Without a federal statute, and that's why Samuel Alito and Justice Thomas and Barrett and Roberts too, I think that even one of the liberal justices too will side with Trump on this, like they'll side with him on immunity. At least the conservatives will side with him on immunity. And some of the January cases, I don't know what the court will rule on that, but he'll get presidential immunity, partial presidential immunity. This will be overturned. And you know what? This has to get to the Supreme Court sooner rather than later. It's blatantly unconstitutional. There is no federal statute that he broke. There's no federal statute listed as one of the statutes that he broke. We don't know the federal crime. They've kept the federal crime hidden. They said that there's a federal crime. We don't know the legal statute.
Actual facts and evidence. That's a real problem, and that's something we'll address on appeal. If we have to take this all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court, we will, because a terrible injustice was done in New York court yesterday.
Wow. Okay, any chance that happens before Election Day?
I'd say never, but I think we will be in front of the New York Appellate Division certainly by July. And we'll see what they do with this. We will be moving for expedited consideration at every opportunity. We want to get this case into the appeals courts as quickly as possible because of how lawless and deeply legally flawed it is. So we're going to pursue every option at our disposal, and we'll see how the cards fall.
Okay.
But entering the appellate process, we are highly optimistic that we can get this thing overturned.
Yeah, the problem is it might be after November the 5th, so it's a moot point after that. I don't even know if the media would report this being overturned. We certainly would, but we know this was the plan all along. You've got a George Soros-funded DA, you've got an extremely motivated judge, and you've got a former president who's got 12 jurors in a district that Biden won with 90% of the vote in 2020. Let me ask you, Will, how concerned are you that the plan all along here by this judge is to lock Donald Trump up starting on July 11th?
A sentence of imprisonment would be wildly out of touch with the way that these charges are usually handled. It would be wildly out of touch with the way that sentencing in New York typically proceeds. I think it would be an absolute travesty. I think it would be would really pull down the.
I think that they want to jail Trump, which is why the Supreme Court must get involved before the sentencing. If the appeals court is going to take time, if the New York Court of Appeals is going to take until after November 5th, there should be some way that his lawyers get to the Supreme Court before November 5th. It's unconstitutional. It affects the entire country, just like the Colorado ban.
The veil and show the world that this is all about election interference. So we certainly don't think that's going to happen. If it does, I think it'll propel Donald J. Trump back to the White House, and we'll have to pull him out of prison to get him to the White House. It's just crazy that these are the conversations that we're having. But no, we're not expecting a sentence of imprisonment. That would be deeply unjust and deeply out of touch with the way that these charges and these sorts of cases are typically handled in New York.
Yeah, so Todd Blanche was on Newsmax last night, and he laid out just the political persecution behind all of this. Take a listen.
There's no dispute about this, is that it was a zombie case. Mm-hmm. And multiple prosecutors at the Southern District of New York and at the District Attorney's Office chose not to bring that case. And 2 months after President Trump announced that he was running for re-election, the grand jury opened and he was indicted 3 months later. The district attorney prosecutes a lot of cases. This is the first and only one of its kind, full stop.
And I know all of Trump's lawyers are taking this in stride with heads held high. But in all honesty, how are you guys feeling after all of this?
Within 5 minutes of receiving the verdict, we were already proceeding to find our grounds for appeal and to think about structuring our appeal. So it's another day. It's not a good day. It wasn't an entirely unexpected day. We've had a lot of wins in recent months. This is obviously something of a reversal for us. But we're going to keep fighting for President Trump, and we're going to keep winning for President Trump. And I have confidence that at the end of the day, justice will win, and President Trump will be back in the White House where he belongs.
So there was a moment where he was talking about the Supreme Court. Of course, I didn't, for some reason, I couldn't find that moment. But here's President Trump. So I believe Will Scharf did mention in that interview the Supreme Court. They are going to take it to the Supreme Court if it takes too long for the appeals court to decide. They have to take it to the Supreme Court. Okay, they have to. There's really no choice here. Here's Hanze von Spakovsky, one of the FEC chairmen, who said the whole thing is completely ridiculous and there's no federal crime. Check this out.
Reaction Francis Hakes does. This is a travesty, a miscarriage of justice. This was a phony prosecution from the very beginning. And for this jury, think about how many weeks this trial went on, how many witnesses came in, and in the very short time that the jury was out, they decided he was guilty on all 34 charges. This is a damage to the reputation of the American justice system like we have never seen. I have a colleague just got back from a conference overseas, and the reaction of lawyers and people there was that the United States has now gotten to be like the countries they are from, where the government uses its law enforcement powers to go after its political opponents. And that, I think, is exactly what happened here.
Hans, what was the underlying federal campaign violation?
And ladies and gentlemen, that's why Samuel Alito, Justice Thomas, Roberts, Amy Coney Barrett, Gorsuch, Kavanaugh will all, and even liberal justices, I think also, at least one of them will overturn this. It has to go, they have to try to get it to the appeals court or the New York Court of Appeals. I think that they'll have the ability to get the Supreme Court to look at it if the appeals court says, well, this will take 5-6 months, a year. They have to get it to the Supreme Court.
Did we ever find that out?
Well, there was nothing in the original indictment about any kind of federal campaign violation. They kept saying that the legal expenses, which is what were listed in the business records, should have been a campaign-related expense, the payment that was made to Stormy Daniels. But as Brad Smith, I know, would have testified, under the test applied by the FEC, this was not a campaign-related expense, period. There's just no question about that. So for this jury to say that, oh, yeah, he violated federal campaign finance laws, and that justifies the underlying verdict, that is such an egregious mistake that at the Court of Appeals in New York, when they get this case, they ought to reverse this almost immediately because of this and so many other mistakes made in the case.
How many do you count? How many mistakes?
I lost count of how many errors were made by this judge and by the prosecution. I mean, the judge let in all kinds of irrelevant evidence that had no bearing on the charges against the president, but were obviously there to blacken the character of Donald Trump. The judge shouldn't have even been on the case. He should have recused himself because of his personal family dealings, his daughter's involvement. his making political contributions in violation of the ethics rules in New York. There are just so many mistakes and errors he made that I don't see how a court of appeals could not overturn this verdict.
So Alina Habba, in this segment, will talk about the Supreme Court. Just 1 second. So they are going to go to the Supreme Court eventually. I mean, I can't predict the time, but it has to be before July 11th or before sentencing or before November 5th.
On appeal are so voluminous, and I know they've been reported on. We'll be taking action on that right away.
So we had experts on last night saying this is just, a thing, to get the statement out there. Trump's a convicted felon because they know they're going to get it overturned on appeal. Right. I mean, Harvey Weinstein's conviction was overturned by the New York Appeals Court, but that wasn't until 4 years later. Do you guys plan to go to as high as the Supreme Court?
If we have to, we will. We have no problem with that. As you know, we've taken those matters that we think are incredibly important to validating and preserving the Constitution that our country was made on. There were incredible constitutional violations in this whole proceeding, including the current gag order that's on me, the president, and anybody that works for him. It's crazy. So, look, if we care about America, we have to fight for it. And his legal team is prepared to do so in whatever way we need to do.
Show what Ellie Honig said that.
So they're trying to get the appeals court, the appeals courts in New York to get involved before sentencing. But I don't think they have any rush. They want Trump to go to jail. And I think that in sentencing, I hope I'm wrong, but I don't see the judge giving Trump even house arrest. I think they want to send him to an actual jail because they've actually committed crimes. So this is the best way for them to say, oh, look, this is here you have all these Republicans in most of the country who think our laptops full of graft and bribery are foundations, are private servers. Oh, you think that these are actual crimes, which they were. You can't transfer top secret intel onto servers. It's physically, cybersecurity impossible from a cybersecurity perspective. It's also blatantly illegal. A laptop full of graft and bribery schemes that the New York Post should have gotten Pulitzer Prizes for breaking the story. But anyway, they want that victory. They've already gotten the victory in their minds. It's a Pyrrhic victory. Trump's poll numbers have gone up, actually. But they want to say he's a convicted felon. They also want to say he's actually in jail. The man is in jail. You're going to vote for him in jail? And so they want to get 1 or 2% of the electorate to just say, I've given up. I like Trump, but there's too much headache. There's too much heat. There's too much drama from Democrats. And they want people to just fatigue and tire of their apoplectic response to Trump. They're not only emotional, their completely irrational response, their vitriol, their venom, their apoplectic, hysterical reaction to Trump at all times. They want a certain part of the electorate to just give up and say, enough. I've had enough of Democrats and their hysteria. I'll give up. I won't vote for Trump anymore. That's what they want. It's a very twisted, warped political calculus. But let's go ahead and yet again look at why this was not a campaign finance issue. At least from a federal sense, it was not. And that's how they elevated the misdemeanors, which is completely unconstitutional.
There's a lot of things. Maybe I want to buy an old used Chevy and trade in my brand new Cadillac so it looks better in the campaign. That positively influences the campaign. Let me ask you something. Members of Congress, we know this is a matter of fact, settled ethics complaints involving sexual harassment. They created this slush fund with taxpayer dollars to quiet the accusers. Non-disclosure agreements, if you will. Hush money. We can use the same phrase. They didn't want their constituents to know. Many of them running for re-election as incumbents. They're using tax dollars. It influences the campaign. Why aren't they indicted?
Well, we know why they're not indicted, right? Because we don't want to indict them. But no, it's a good example of things that influence the campaign. And it's worth noting that under the FEC's regulations, if you're an incumbent office holder, you're presumed to be running for re-election. So you're all presumed to be candidates unless they've announced that they're not seeking re-election. So they would be candidates, and this is something that they probably did to influence their future campaign or their perception as office holders. And one thing that's worth adding here, Mark, is because I hear this from people all the time, and even some other, election people who know election law, lawyers and some former other commissioners will say, yes, but it was to influence an election. But the FEC in its regulations very specifically rejected the idea that even as to whether it was primarily to influence the election or not, and choosing instead this test that it has to be an obligation that was created for the election. In other words, they didn't want to get into the question of trying to guess, well, did they do this primarily for the election or primarily for personal purposes? And it's very specific about that in the regulations. And I think that's a very important point that people need to keep in mind. And that was done actually to make it more objective and actually to prevent candidates from using their campaign funds for personal use. But, that's the flip side. And I tell people, imagine if you're a lawyer for the Trump campaign and you want to do it all right. You've got one provision of the statute says I have to pay it with the campaign funds. Another provision seems to say I can't pay it with campaign funds. Somebody's going to get them coming or going, and that's part of the problem.
So if you're a lawyer...
So it wasn't even an FEC crime, yet they convicted him on an FEC crime. Let's go ahead and listen. This is President Trump right here.
Are you having a good time? How are you? Nice to see you. Nice to see you. How are you? Nice to see you. This is a good time. You all grew up in a place just like this, right? How are you? You were so amazing. I walk in, nobody knew I was coming, and she grabbed me and she hugged me. She said, I like you. And she's tough, too. She doesn't like a lot of people, right? But it's an honor to have you and your friends and everybody.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Michaela.
To be able to
It's great. We're going to have some good beer. We have the fake news with us tonight. We're going to have a little good stuff to eat. Mar-a-Lago is a special place. You see that? It is lovely. So I just did a couple of interviews that are on tonight. Dr. Phil. I did a Dr. Phil interview. It was interesting. And so let's go and let's have something good to eat. And we appreciate very much everybody. Thank you for coming. It's a great group of people. And I appreciated you very much. That was something when we walked in.
Probably crying.
No, it was beautiful. That was from the heart, too.
Yes.
And I think to a large extent because of what we've done with the colleges, black colleges and universities, I got them funded. When I was president, I got to know the heads of many of the black colleges and universities because they'd come, and after 2 years I said, why do you keep coming back? He said, well, we feel like beggars because they never extend it. They give it 1 year, and then we have to come back the next. I said, you shouldn't have to do that. And these are great people. The job they do is incredible. And I got them long-term financing, more money than they ever thought possible, more than they wanted. And they're doing a great job. I said, the only bad part is I'll never see you again, probably. That's the bad thing. They said, we don't like that either. But I got them taken care of. And Michaela knew that. And she came up to me and she said, thank you. So I appreciate it.
Trump gave more funding than any president ever to historically black colleges and universities, made the funding permanent. And Democrats call him the greatest tyrant who's ever lived. Okay, so that's the Democratic. But President Obama did not do that. Bill Clinton didn't do that. Biden hasn't done anything close to that. It was Trump who funded HBCUs more so than any other president and made the funding permanent, which is a huge, the funding's now permanent. That's a huge story. That's a huge accomplishment.
Thank you very much, Judge. Thank you, everybody.
Mr. President, after your verdict, have you lost confidence in your legal team? Have you lost confidence in your legal team after the verdict?
No. It's a rigged system, and it's a terrible system, actually, but it's a rigged system, and I think we're doing very well. We had a big thing happen in Georgia today. You saw that. And step by step, this is a rigged situation. This is a situation where they go after a political opponent, and it all takes place from the White House and from the DOJ, including the state and city cases. And if I wasn't running, there would be nothing. And we're leading Biden by a lot. He's the worst president in the history of our country. And we're leading him by a lot. We have to beat him because otherwise we're not going to have a country left. So,
in your New York trial, you said you wanted.
What can you do against the coordinated warfare against the rogue party?
Well, they have to fight it. They have to fight it. And it's a very dangerous thing because if the Republicans go after the Democrats the same way, we're going to have, that's all we're going to be doing in our country. It's a very dangerous thing, but you can't weaponize the DOJ. And you look at the DOJ. The DOJ ran this thing, the local. You call it a city or a state, but the DOJ ran it. And it's a very bad thing. It's a very dangerous moment, really a dangerous moment for our country. Can't let it happen.
In your New York case, you said you want to see the Supreme Court intervene. How and when exactly do you want to see that?
Well, we'll see what happens. This is a unique case because they've interfered with the Republican nominee for President of the United States. There's never been anything like that before. And in this case, it was a judge who was appointed. He didn't even get elected. He's appointed. And you take a look at the conflict. Now, I'm gagged. I have a gag order. Can you believe it? I'm the Republican nominee. I'm leading Biden by a lot. And I will say we had the biggest fundraising in the history of politics over the last week. There's never been anything like it. And that, in a certain way, is like a poll, I would say, right? Yeah. It's a big poll. But it's been, I think, the biggest fundraising ever. Because the people know it's wrong what's happening. You can't do that to a country. And you can't gag a nominee. Can you imagine? You're running for office and you're gagged. You're not allowed to talk. When that happens, we are no longer a democracy. And we're not going to let that happen. And I know a lot of Republicans want retribution. They want to do that. We're going to see what happens. Hopefully everything works out, but you can't do it. You can't have a local judge tell a Republican nominee that he can't talk about things because there's a lot of things that we can talk about. They're very easy questions to talk about. You can't let this happen to our country. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, President. Do you regret testifying, Mr. President? Do you regret? Thank you.
So, ladies and gentlemen, I think that Samuel Alito and every one of these justices, when I do my live streams, I'm telling the world that these justices have, especially the conservative ones, even the liberal ones, I think you'll get one or two, they've already made their decision. When it gets to them, they've already thought about what they're going to do when this absurd, unconstitutional conviction based on an imaginary federal crime gets to them. There was no federal crime. A state cannot, this is just basic civics, a basic understanding of federalism and the Constitution. A state cannot level a federal crime at a citizen. The federal government and the state can level crimes. But a state cannot say that Trump committed FEC crimes without listing any of the laws in this handbook right here. These are all the statutes. Okay? You can get that from the actual FEC website. And there's not one statute he broke. We don't know the actual FEC statute. They've kept it secret. And that's a fact. We don't know the statute because there was no statute he broke, according to Hans A. von Spakovsky, you just heard, and also Bradley Smith. That's why I know Samuel Alito and definitely the conservatives on the Supreme Court have already decided they're going to overturn it when it gets to them. Hit subscribe to this channel. I'll be back, people, at around 10 p.m. Eastern. Be here for 10 p.m. Eastern.